for pot roast.
If I was inviting Grandma over for roast beef dinner, we'd probably have this one.
Have they been lying to us saying that blue smoke is the only way to turn out superior brisket? I'm starting to have my suspicions. So today I'm coming up with a test. White smoke versus blue smoke. I'm smoking two briskets, comparing two wildly different smoke profiles to find out which is actually best. Hot and fast versus low and slow. I already know, even inside the same cook vessel can turn out a wildly different result. And thanks to a year-long CFD study, I've already learned that placing my food higher in the dome is giving me the maximum performance inside of any Kamado style grill. So of course, I'm going to be placing today's briskets as high as I can on the expander rack, and I don't want any variables like the temperature, since I know, even using my 2 extra large green eggs, that a different temperature can turn out a wildly different result. So I'm gonna keep these as close as possible to the exact same temperature, so the only difference is what you see going on behind me, to find out if the pursuit of blue smoke has been robbing me of turning out the best possible result. Let me fill you in on all the details. Earlier this year, when I was in Texas, I had a chance to eat at some of the best places Texas or the country or maybe even the world has to offer. And I'm really thankful to people like Aaron Franklin and or John Bates from Interstellar Barbecue and Cooper from Barry Barbecue and a whole bunch of other places for taking the time out of their busy schedules to talk to me. But if there is one thing that is clear, over the past 20 plus years or so that I've been smoking, early on, there was not YouTube, there was only a few resources, and so often the interviews with Aaron Franklin would surface to the top about thin blue smoke and or certain temperatures. But I've learned over the years, the size of the cooking vessel that you're using, something like 1,000-gallon offset smoker that you might find in Texas, doesn't translate to the same advice of something like the extra large big green eggs behind me, nor do the temperatures, even inside of the exact same cookers. You can get a completely different result at 2 different temperatures. And lately, there's also a difference of opinion on clean smoke versus dirty smoke. Places like Barre Barbecue and a number of others start off with what Cooper calls cold smoking, which I think is really just low and slow because he's aiming for about 200 to 225 degrees Fahrenheit. If we were actually cold smoking cheese or something like that, we'd be below about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. No matter what you call it though, the notion here of whiter, dirtier smoke to start off the cook and then finishing hot and faster is something that is taking over in many top Texas places and has been the key behind some of my recent best results ever on a Kamado style grill by using what I'll call the hybrid approach, where we start low and slow with a dirtier fire and we end hotter and faster. But that is a great theory, and theories are only handy if they're proven to be actual facts. And the best way to find that out is a good old-fashioned head-to-head. So I've prepared 2 briskets. I've seasoned them up using our family's favorite Ultimate Texas SPG rub recipe that I share on the website for free. It's a great mix of things like Black's rub, the Goldie's rub, as well as the Franklin rub. Took a little bit of our family's favorite things in a blind taste test from each of those, trimmed up the briskets to be about identical as you can get for 2 different cuts of brisket so that there's no other variables, and set up our smokers to start off at about 220 degrees Fahrenheit for the first few hours of our cook before I'm going to ramp up the temperatures. Since there's a couple of different setups involved, let me show you before I lit the grills some options if you're following along, whether it's a large, an extra large, a Classic Joe, a Big Joe, or any other number of grills, how you might be able to best adapt today's learnings and experience to your particular grill. So how are we gonna set up for our blue smoke versus white smoke experiment? Well, I've got a couple different options I'll bring you nice and close to give you a few ideas to follow along with. So whether you're following along with a large or an extra large big green egg or a Classic or a Big Joe, Kamado Joe, or any other brand grill, I wanna give you a couple different setup options that you can adapt more easily to whatever grill you're following along with. Okay, our first setup is going to be for those following along with the convector. So let me install this in the expander rack. Next, some 1/2-inch spacers. You can use nuts and bolts, just don't use galvanized if you're going to go for steel. Pizza stone. So I'll cover this kick-ash can with foil. I like using this one as it has little feet on the bottom that give it a little bit of clearance so that any of the fat dripping doesn't burn being exposed to the heat. This is only gonna work if you're using the raised rack accessory on the extra large egg. If I were to show you here by installing some cooking grids, that the grids are going to be contacting the pan versus sitting about an inch lower where they need to be. But since I'm on the extra large size, I'll be able to drop the raised grid accessory and have my brisket up top. If you don't have the raised rack accessory or you're following along on a large egg with the convector basket, let me show you an option. So in this case, you'll need to remove the drip pan. I would put some foil or cover your pizza stone with foil, but this will still give you the benefit of the double indirect. And on the infrared camera, I saw well over 100°F reduction in this method. And since there's no heat seeping through that line, that's going to give us really nice protection and would be a great option. I'll add my pan since I'm going to use the kick-ash pan and the raised rack. And I'll move the camera, show you a half moon setup. This setup for the extra large egg, I'm going to use the CGS spider accessory by hanging it below my expander rack, like so. So hopefully you can see that that gives us about 3 inches of clearance. Drop in a half moon deflector. The weight of the deflector will help hold everything in place on the stones so it's not shifting. Again, the only downside of the CGS design is that it drops our plates below the expander rack. It can come into contact with our charcoal, so this may only be a suitable setup for people following along with an extra large egg. I'll come back to the large in a second. A stock half moon convector. And our raised cooking grids. Spin this so you can see. So this would be the back of our grill, this would be the front. And the advantage of this is going to give me direct access to the fire. When it's time to switch over to full indirect cooking, I can slide in my extra deflectors, drop in a drip pan just like the setup earlier, and then continue cooking. Now, if you're following along with a large where the top of the expander rack is only 14 inches versus this grid nearly the size of a large egg at 18 inches, you won't be able to fit something like today's full packer briskets up top. And or if you're following along on a Kamado Joe, you don't have this fancy dancy sliding rack that gives us direct access to the fire. So your better option, even though the CFD data is telling me that cooking higher in the dome is best, if you want to employ the cold smoking method, that's still what I would pick, is remove the top rack. So for a large egg or any other brand with sort of half moon configurations, this is what I would do to use half grids and a deflector, whether you go single or double. For the cold smoke, doesn't matter since we're not dealing with too much heat. You don't really need the double deflector protection for that. I've just added it for later on, so that's one less thing for me to do. But this will give you access to your fire and you could still benefit from cold smoking. And then when it's time to go for full indirect, you could drop in your other heat deflector and cooking grid and just continue on at this level. Regardless of the size or the model that you're following along with, I definitely would encourage you, if you've not tried double indirect. I've heard from thousands of people that let me know that this has turned out their best low and slow cooking inside of a Kamado. This will force our fire to work harder, as well as protect the bottom of what we're cooking from drying out and becoming leathery, which is incredibly important on long, slow cooks. So brisket, pork shoulder, or even ribs fall into that category of being worth trying the double indirect method. But as you can see, using third-party products like the Spider, there are a couple compromises that we need to make. So I've reached out to some manufacturers to spin out a design that over the last year I've come up with based off of CFD data to make this even easier. So stay tuned in the future if that's something that you'd be interested in. Hopefully I'll have a solution that is a little bit easier, but for the time being, things like nuts, bolts, spacers, or anything you can come up with to get about a ½ inch air gap, I see on the infrared camera that this provides a substantial benefit to every single model that I've tested it in, and will give you, I think, an immediate improvement in results. So now we've got our two different setups. Let's build our blue smoke and white smoke fires. For our white smoke, I'm going to be using a small coal bed and then burning those splits directly on the bed of coals. So unlike our other example, we're gonna leave everything open, but I'm gonna get the coal bed nice and hot so that when we add our wood splits, they burn nice and clean immediately. Start up our grill gun again, and get our coal bed nice and hot. Coal bed looks good. If we want to reduce the amount of time that these burn, not all white smoke is created equal. I'll come back to that in a minute. Despite the fact we're going to see whiter smoke, I don't want creosote. So to reduce the risk of creosote, these are naturally seasoned versus kiln dried. So by placing them in the charcoal basket near the fire, that will help reduce the time to combustion. Later on, you can even place these, your neck splits at the front, just so that we get good combustion when we move them over. But I can just leave them near the heat. Right now, there's lots of heat coming from that coal bed. That'll make combustion much easier. So over here on our full double indirect setup that we're going to go for the clean blue smoke, you can see the temperature gauge is quickly rising, so I want to step in and adjust, but I've been waiting until it starts to feel warm to the hands. And by warm to the hands, this should be a fair bit hotter, about 20% hotter or so than a hot tub would feel like. And I think we are there now, where I don't want to keep my hands on for much more than 5-10 seconds. So we are probably somewhere in the about there, 130 degrees, so exactly 30% warmer than a hot tub. So I think it's about time to grab our convector basket and raised rack. Close that down. And while I wait for those to heat soak, I'm gonna go for about 2 fingers on our regulator cap up top, and also about 2 fingers or so on our bottom draft door. And we will make our final adjustments once the ceramics that we just added have heat soaked and we start to stabilize around 250 degrees. This will continue to drop since we've just installed fresh cold ceramics to block the heat. Grab a meter probe. Brisket. Cooking. Place those wood splits on our coal bed. Should be nice and hot, so I'm using protection with some oven gloves underneath. And just like that, they are combusting. I could drop my next few for about 30-40 minutes in time at the front, so they are ready to go the same way. Our expander. It's going to position the lower half deflector towards the back, just to stop the flames coming up and burning the back side of our brisket. A little more protection again with the second deflector. If you don't have two, that's fine, just use this one exactly like I have pushed to the back to stop the heat coming up from behind. Raised rack. Our brisket. Meter probe number 2. And we'll leave our top vent of our regulator cap all the way open, but we'll close our bottom draft door down to about a pinky's width, so just barely open. Okay, so we've got our briskets on at the exact same temperature. So I'm using the same wood, the same charcoal, 2 as close as I could find briskets at Costco. And so we're not gonna have the variable of hot and fast versus low and slow to throw anything into the mix here. Instead, we're focusing on the color of the smoke. One you can see very clearly, and one that is just that wispy white blue smoke to find out which is best. So my game plan from here is just to continue to add wood splits as those are required about every half hour or so. And then after a couple hours, I'll add some charcoal, use my torch, just so I don't get any bad off-putting charcoal taste from it starting to combust. Add in my extra deflectors and then continue along on the top rack of both extra large big green eggs until they reach an internal temperature somewhere between 190 to 195 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm gonna throw them in the oven for an overnight hot hold until tomorrow afternoon when we have guests coming that I'll be slicing and serving these up, but not before you get a sneak peek ahead of everyone else, and we can do a bit of a blind taste test with Sarah to see which she prefers, white smoke or blue smoke. Let me know down in the comments what you think is going to win. Well, I might need to wait all day for some briskets to cook. For you, the way to go by, just like this. So I've just pulled out our 2 briskets from the overnight hot hold at 150 degrees. By the way, if you've just heard things like the overnight hot hold, this is a secret I came across at every Texas Monthly Top 50 joint that I visited. Not only is it not practical to try and time briskets when large groups of people are showing up if you're a barbecue joint, the same could be true if you are hosting a gathering. So the hot hold solves a problem of practicality in terms of getting your brisket to actually be done when you want to eat it. But I think on the backyard side of things, this is where there's an even bigger benefits. Learning when things are exactly probe tender can take years. You could skip to the front of the line if you adopt the hot hold. Since brisket can finish anywhere from 197 degrees all the way up to 211 degrees Fahrenheit, there's about a 30-minute window where if you are under it, your brisket will be a little bit tough, and if you're over it, it'll be dry and crumbly. So learning when to balance that knife's edge can take a long time to build up the skill and cook many, many briskets in order to get to the spot of pulling your briskets at the perfect spot. But you can skip the learning curve here and adopt the hot hold method by pulling your briskets at 195. This is like the equivalent if you're a golfing fan. Instead of trying to go to a fairway or a driving range and just hit anything that's green, it's wide open spaces. This is what the hot hold does. It's just get it in the green, it's good enough. Whereas when you're trying to get the perfect pull spot, this could be like chipping onto an island surrounded by water. It's that much more difficult. So if you have a party coming up or you're cooking something like a brisket and you have a question on your mind, how do I make sure that I don't mess it up? How do I make sure that I get it done on time? The hot hold can be your friend at solving both of those problems. So on your left, my right, this is the white smoke brisket, and on my left, your right, this is the blue smoke brisket. So the blue smoke was on this egg, the white one is on that egg. I've just mixed them up. So I bring Sarah out for a taste test. She doesn't know which is the wiser. And it is a little bit obvious, but not as big of a difference as you might think on camera in terms of the bark. Clearly, we're a little bit darker on the white smoke brisket and not too far off, but a little bit more of a mahogany colored smoke on the blue smoke brisket. Let me bring you nice and close. We'll slice them up. I'll grab Sarah and we'll dive in for our taste test. Try and keep everything separate on the board. I forgot to mention the ideal time to go to the hot hold is about 190 to 195 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was able to get both of these within a minute of each other to 195 degrees in the flat using an instant read thermometer. That is about the perfect time to pull them off, let them rest for about 30 minutes, and then go into the oven. So I don't want to squeeze out all that juice, but what I'm looking for here is a couple things. One, we've got this brown squishy fat on the top so that we've rendered our fat cap nicely. And then speaking of brown, you can see we've just got oodles of juice that if I were to squeeze that, that would all come flying out, which I'm not going to do. But let's get a couple of slices of our flat, and I'll do a couple slices from the point for each one. It's a beautiful looking brisket. Flops nice, not breaking apart. But if I just pull that gently, we are completely coming apart as you would like to see a nice tender brisket. I'll get one I didn't mangle here for Sarah and I. Get a slice of our fatty end. Again, super floppy, super tender. I think it's gonna be a good one. Once again, perfectly rendered seam fat, nice squishy. Hope that's coming through on camera, but you see that golden brown color just underneath the bark that is oozing brisket gold. Again, not gonna squeeze that all out, but that is a good looking brisket. Just like the other one, flopping, ever so slightly tugging, completely comes apart, nice and juicy. Get a couple samples here. Looks good. Let me go get Sarah. I hope you're hungry today.
I am.
We've got lots of brisket.
Good. Looks like it.
Brisket for days. So we are doing another experiment today, as you may be able to tell by the fact we have two briskets. But unlike before, There's not a difference in temperature. There's not a difference in cooker.
Okay.
We're comparing, actually I won't give anything else away. So why don't you start at the top on the left side and then go to the bottom, and we'll start at the top on the right side and go to the bottom, or flip for the screen. But over there for you and I, grab a piece.
Sure.
Cheers.
Can we, cheers. Might have to break this apart a little. It's a big piece. Okay, it's good. I'm curious what I'm comparing when I don't have any information.
Yeah, you'll find out. We'll jump to the top of this side.
Okay.
Cheers again.
Cheers.
Nice pull apart.
It is, it does,
Tender.
it pulls nicely.
What? I didn't tell you anything.
I'm always worried if I'm gonna mess it up.
You can't mess it up. It's a blind taste test.
I know, but you said you cooked them the same, but they taste very different to me.
Very different. Okay, so what in very different is coming to mind for, or do you want to go to the point 10 first?
Let's do point in first, and then we'll see.
Give yourself a little bit more information.
I'm surprised they're so different. Okay, I'm curious.
Cheers.
Cheers. Okay.
I can keep up.
And
Okay.
then this one.
Yes.
All right, last one.
Yep. Cheers.
Cheers. And then we'll see if I mess your taste test up. It's juicy.
So, not that we are comparing
Okay.
tenderness,
No.
but those are both super tender.
Yeah, they're both tender. They're delicious. The texture is very similar. They're both juicy.
Yeah.
It was great.
So, based off of that,
Yes.
which of these two do you prefer?
Okay.
Is there a preface?
Yes. No. This one on the right for
Yep.
brisket, the smoke is more flavorful.
I agree. Yeah.
It just, the flavor profile of this one for traditional brisket is delicious.
Okay.
Now, I am not always the person to ask about smoke flavor.
No.
Because this one on the left definitely has less smoke.
Yes.
And there are some people, me included, that sometimes prefer that, but no. If you're having traditional brisket barbecue, I feel like the smoke enhances the brisket on the right.
This one definitely tastes like smoked brisket.
Yes, yes.
This one, I can't quite put my finger on it.
Well, to me, this tastes more like a roast beef. Not like you didn't, I don't want to say you cooked it in the oven because
No.
it's still delicious. You cooked it on the egg, I'm assuming, back
Yes.
here?
Yep.
But it tastes more like a roast beef dinner, not barbecue brisket.
Right.
Yes.
So now that you've shared your thoughts, let me tell you what we're comparing.
Okay.
So on the left for us, the right for you guys, is the thin blue smoke.
Okay.
Right? So this is
Yes.
something that, Aaron Franklin professes, and, sort of 20 years ago, you go after the pursuit of thin blue smoke. And while I've learned over time that if we were to do this on an offset, thin blue smoke on an offset can still have lots of flavor, where thin blue smoke on a pellet grill or a kettle or a Kamado may have sort of borderline, like we're saying, pot roast flavor.
Yeah,
where-
just not enough of that
Right,
smoke. that
not
you want.
enough. And I know you don't like a lot of smoke,
No.
but the flavor
Yeah, the flavor was delicious.
here
Yeah.
is night and day difference.
Yeah,
and
it
so what we did here, and by the way, on the flavor, I still think, I'll get your words, good flavor versus gross flavor. Because again, not all white smoke is created equal. If we go too far, too restricted,
Oh,
you can
yeah,
get
no.
creosote.
Yeah.
If we go white smoke for a little bit, sort of like using that strong perfume analogy, where if you spray yourself like crazy, it can be a little bit overbearing, but in small doses, it can be a pleasant thing. And I think that is exactly what we got today. But what do you think?
No, it's true. This one it's yummy. It's not like a bitter smoke. It's a yummy smoked brisket. It's delicious. Yeah.
So you had to pick one, serve for as a brisket. What would you
Yes,
pick?
this
Yeah,
one.
that one?
Yeah.
Okay. And for
if
pot roast?
I was inviting Grandma over for roast beef dinner, we'd probably have this one.
Well, you know what? We're doing a chopped brisket sandwich with friends
Yes,
that don't
we
like
are.
smoke, and I actually think
Probably will use this
that
one.
would be a great one
Yes,
for that.
Yes.
And
But this one's more flavorful.
our friends and neighbors
Yeah.
that like smoked
Yeah.
brisket, this is the only
For
one I'm
sure.
showing them. Well, thanks so much for helping us decide thin blue smoke versus white smoke. I'll give you a couple recaps after we clean up. now that's all cleaned up, just want to come back with a few final thoughts on things that you can apply to your next brisket cook. So hopefully you picked up from today's test that not all white smoke is created equal. Yes, there is an extreme white smoke that we absolutely want to avoid, something I go into more detail in one of my digital downloads on the science of good smoke, but wood burning below the target temperature that we want for sort of good clean combustion is producing creosote. Creosote you can taste. If you don't know what it is, it tastes bad. This is the licking a wet tree example. This is not good barbecue. When we get wood burning, even if the flame is struggling but visible, this is something you can see more clearly in an offset than in a closed vessel like the Big Green Eggs that I was using in today's cook. But you can still get great smoke flavor so long as the wood is burning cleanly, which is why we place it either below the charcoal and or on a charcoal bed, only 1 or 2 pieces at a time, so that when I place it on the coal, I got that nice clean combustion. That is a critical point of distinction. And so if, like me, you've pursued the clean blue smoke, and I read in Facebook groups or things like that all the time, or in comments where people have said, I pulled my brisket off because I saw a little bit of smoke visible from my cap, and is this bad? Hope this gives you just an opportunity to reset the bar here in terms of not all white smoke is bad. If we have not overloaded our cook chamber with too much wood, this can cause problems. Way too much wood, this is where we run into issues, which is why I only added 4 pieces at the bottom and or went for 1 or 2 splits at the time. Another issue for white smoke can be grease. So if you're not using a drip pan like the Kick-Ash basket cans that I was using in the grills, this prevents all of that grease. They were both full in terms of the amount of tallow that was collected. Otherwise, that's all going in our firebox. And you may not notice it at low temperatures. The next time you go to sear a steak or cook a pizza, it'll look like a locomotive coming through town in terms of all the white smoke billowing out before you're able to get to cooking something like pizza or steak. This kind of white smoke is also not good white smoke. And so a way of preventing this from happening is use some aluminum foil or a drip pan like I did today, or combining both, putting the foil inside of a drip pan just so it makes cleanup that much easier when it's all said and done, is another way to make sure that you get the good white smoke. And then the last tip is coming back to that perfume example, just thinking again that sometimes no perfume is not necessarily a good thing, and way too much perfume is not a good thing. Think of the same thing like smoke as a perfume or as salt. Finding that balance that you like and your family likes is sure to take your barbecue to the next level. Thanks so much for hanging out there, and if there's anything else you'd like to see I didn't cover today, be sure to check out the members live section down below. I go live once a month, can answer your questions in a real-time format. Otherwise, let me know your future video requests in the comments and I'll try and add that to the calendar. That's it for today. I'm James from Smokin' That Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.